Hey there, welcome to the 10th video of the Golang with CSRF token project series. In this video, I want to take some time and finish off a couple of the database level functions. Because no matter where we are in the project, we're going to be calling some database level functions, and it's just good to have some of them in place, some of them to do with the users, right? And then we will resume what we were doing with the create refresh token string function. And then we'll also work on our middleware functions after that. So let's go to our db.go file. And here what I want to do is I have my users, I've defined my users as a map of strings, and there will be multiple models.user. In the sense, we have defined a user here, which will have a username, password, hash, and role. And the users is going to be a map, which will be multiple strings, and basically multiple users will be there. Okay. So before I start writing the initDB function, what I'll do is I'll also create a refresh token, which is basically a map, again, string. And now what the initDB function does is basically it creates refresh tokens, and it creates, as you know, that make function just creates a new map based on whatever you tell it to make, it'll make it for you. So in this case, you want to make a map string again, basically initializing the refresh tokens. That's what we're doing here. And again, this also is refresh tokens, multiple or plural, because multiple tokens is what we want to store there, right? Because storing just one token does not require a map. Storing multiple tokens requires a map. So that's what your initDB function does. Now for your store user function, like you've noticed that it requires a username and password and role, and returns a UUID and error after basically the new user is created. So what we'll do is we'll first say random strings dot generate random string. We have built both the functions already, right? Generate random strings and bytes, both of them are ready. So generate random strings, and 32 will be the length. Whatever comes back, we'll store it as UUID. Now you can use a separate UUID package to do this for you, but I just want to show you a different approach here. I mean, in some cases, sometimes people become so dependent on external libraries that they don't know what's actually happening inside the library. So if you were to create a UUID, if you were to use a library like that, all that's happening is basically this is all that's happening. It's just generating a random, byte for you, random string for you, and this is how it's creating it. This is how a UUID is created. Okay. Now, what we'll say is if error is not equal to nil, you return nothing and you return the error. That means if the error is there, then you want to return nothing, and for the UUID, and you want to return the error. But otherwise, we want to perform some functions. So firstly, what we want to perform, the function that we want to perform is we want to check if the UUID that was created right now is even unique or not. So, I mean, if you use an external library for UUID, you don't have to do that because you can be sure that it always creates a new unique ID for you. In this case, you just want to check that. So you'll say u is equal to models.user, and for u is not equal to users UUID, random strings dot generate random string 32. If error is not equal to nil, then return empty and error. And when you're storing the user, right, in the database, you also want to generate a precrypt hash. So when you store a user, basically, you don't want to store the user directly with the password that he's chosen. You want to hash it always. And the hashing algorithm, we get it from this package called bcrypt, which we have imported here, I think. Yeah, xcrypt or bcrypt. And what this does for us is that if somebody somehow gets hold of our database, they can't just take all the passwords, because all the passwords should be encrypted and hashed, basically. That's what we're doing here. And we'll capture this in a variable called password hash. And the error that we may get here can be captured in hash error, a new variable for just handling the error, so that we can handle the error like this. If hash error is not equal to nil, error will become equal to hash error. And that's what we'll return later on. Let me pull this in the, in this line. And now what you want to do is you want to say users UUID is equal to models.user username comma password hash comma role, and you'll return UUID comma error. So this is what your store user function does. Your delete user function does something very similar. It just deletes that particular user from the users that you've created, the map that you've created of users. You'll just delete that particular user with a particular UUID. That means to this function you'll just pass the UUID, which is type string and models dot user comma error. Right. Now fetch user by ID function almost works like it would in a database. Here, as of now, I'm just using maps of strings. I have not started using a database as of now. Okay, this is our database for now, just the maps. That's it. We don't have an actual database like MongoDB or Postgres. But if we plan to add it in the future, which I may plan or may not plan, I might just leave it here, because the most important thing that I want to show you is the CSRF tokens and how to work with it, rather than working with the database, because I've already covered in multiple videos on how to work with many different types of databases, right? SQLite, MySQL, MongoDB, Postgres, Redis, even Redis. Now I'll be covering Cockroach and MariaDB as well, and Cassandra in the future. So you can watch any of those videos and take that code and paste it here. It'll work completely fine. But just to keep things simple, I'm just as of now not using our database here. So for fetch user by ID, what we'll do is we'll say UUID string, because obviously if you want to fetch a particular user, you want to pass that ID, their ID, right? And what this returns is it returns a lot of users. It returns that particular user, sorry. And that will be of type models or user, because the model we already defined in our models package, and we've defined it as a user, because that's what we want to return here. So first let's define a variable called u. It will be users or UUID. And then a blank user that we want to return from here. So models dot user and an empty struct. As you can see, the models dot user is a struct, but when you want to initialize a struct and as an empty struct, you write like this, 2 empty brackets at the end. So if blank user not equal to u, you're going to say return u comma nil, and else return u comma errors dot new user not found that matches given UUID. Awesome. Now you already have the code for fetch user by username. So we've completed 2 more functions here, 3 more functions here, and you want to just save this. So this generate bcrypt hash, right? It's giving you a squiggly line here because it's not an error. It's not a function that exists at the moment. Oh, sorry, it is a function that exists at the moment. Generate bcrypt hash. Okay, I think it's what's not matching is that I've not written here password and string, and what it returns a string or an error. Now hopefully, yeah, so as you can see, the squiggly line have gone away because I'm using the function as it intended to be used. So for the store refresh token, what I'll do is I'll return GTI, which is a string, and an error. Doesn't take anything. And but before that, what I'll do is I'll work on the generate bcrypt hash function, because we just talked about it, we just use it here, and it doesn't exist, as in we have not written the function definition. So it just makes more sense to actually work on this function than any other function before it. All right, so how does generate bcrypt hash function work? It uses the bcrypt library to create the hash. So the function that we get is generate from password. What does it generate? Byte comma bcrypt dot default cost, and you'll get hash comma errors. And you'll return a string with the hash, or you'll return an error. So this is what this function does. Now let's work on this function called log user in, which is called from your myjwt.go. So here you'll have your username string, take password, which is a string. You'll return models.user comma string comma error, if in case there's an error. So what happens here is you fetch that user by name. So I'm making this function now because this function exists. We already have this function. So to log the user in, firstly I'll get that user using his name, which, because I'll be passing the username right to this function, so I'll have access to the username. And this function, as you can see here, returns three different things: models.user, string, and error. So now all the things that we did earlier are kind of coming together, and I hope everything is kind of making sense to you better. And here you'll have user and error. So you'll say log dot println user comma uuid comma user error. If user error is not equal to nil, we'll return models dot user comma empty for the string and user error. From user comma uuid check password against hash, and user dot password hash comma password. So what this function does, check password against hash, a very similar kind of a thing setup we have used in JWT series as well, and in the e-commerce series that we are right now working on, and the restaurant management series. All those series we have kind of done a very similar thing where the user will provide a password, and we have his password stored with the hash in our database. In this case, it's not a database, it's just a map of strings. So whatever you have stored, we want to compare that, both the passwords we want to compare. We want to see if those passwords match or not. And that's what we're doing here. Okay. To log the user in, you must check that. First, you must check if the user even exists with you, right? That's why you're fetching the user by username, right? And you're also checking his password against the hash. Now, what you're going to do is we're going to work on this function called check password against hash, because it's again a bcrypt function. So this takes in your hash, which is a string, takes in the password, which is a string, and obviously returns an error. and you'll return bcrypt dot compare hash and password, byte and hash, comma byte and password. Awesome. So I'll be ending this video here, and in the next video we'll just continue with some of the database functions, and then we'll also pick up from where we left off in the myjewelry.go file and the middleware file. But I hope things are clear till now. If things are not clear, you can always put it in the comments below, or you can reach out to me on LinkedIn. I'll help you out. I help everybody out, right? Everybody who reaches out to me on LinkedIn. Sometimes people email me also on my personal email ID, which I don't check a lot, but whenever I check it, I always try and help. So thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.